So welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to lecture number 5 of this lecture series called Prelims Powerplay 2026. Now, as you all know that we are continuing with Polity series, okay, so we'll cover important topics with respect to polity. Now, today's lecture is going to be short and crisp, but that doesn't mean that this lecture is not important. The reason is that today we are going to talk about Vice President of India. And the reason why Vice President of India has a high probability of featuring in your prelims as well as mains exam is because in July this year, Vice President of India Jagdeep Dhankar unceremoniously resigned. The reason I'm saying unceremoniously is because, well, many people said that this resignation made no sense, but he resigned. Now that brought the office of Vice President of India into, well, the headlines. And because of that, it becomes an important part of your current affairs. And because it was famous due to current affairs, well, it has a high probability of featuring in your exams. That is why today we are going to cover Vice President of India. It is going to be short and crisp. Nonetheless, it is very important. Like I said, very high probability of featuring in your exams. Okay. Now, the thing is, before starting, let me convey this to you. Just watching this lecture series would be job half done. You have to follow these 4 golden steps. Watch the lecture, revise and memorize it from the notes, then ask your doubts and then give the test on time. These are the 4 steps that if you will follow till your prelims examination would serve you really well and you will have a very high chance of clearing prelims exam and preparing for mains exam. Okay, so do not forget these 4 steps. By the way, the registration for Prelims Powerplay, all the details are given in the comment section below. Okay, all right, let's begin today's lecture. Vice President of India. So let's begin. Okay. So Polity Lecture 5, Vice President of India. Now, let's first talk about what does our constitution say with respect to Vice President of India. Okay. So, well, Article 63 to 71, they deal with the office of Vice President of India. And the office of Vice President of India is pretty much similar to the American Vice President. Okay. We'll see how. In the end, we'll also compare the 2 Vice Presidents. Okay. It is very much similar to American Vice President. So we can also say this, if there is an MCQ in your prelims examination, that the office of Vice President of India is modeled on, and the option is American Vice President, you will mark it correct. Clear? Now, Vice President of India is the second highest dignitary in the country. Who's the first highest? Well, the President. The President is the highest dignitary. He's also known as the first citizen of India. Right? The second highest dignitary is Vice President. Now, Vice President of India, well, it's a very peculiar office because he performs both executive as well as legislative functions. Legislative functions because he acts as the ex officio chairman of Rajya Sabha. And executive functions, how? Well, when the office of president lies vacant, he, Vice President of India, temporarily performs the functions of the president. And president is the executive head of our country. So when the president is absent, Vice President becomes the executive head. So his office is a peculiar mixture of legislative and executive responsibilities. Clear? The current Vice President of India is C.P. Radhakrishnan, okay, just after Jagdeep Dhankar. Alright. Now, let's talk about how the Vice President of India is elected. Look, everything related to Vice President of India is important for us to remember, okay? So we will cover everything. So first, let's start with the elections of Vice President of India, okay? Now, well, the Vice President of India is elected by an electoral college. Okay. Now, this electoral college consists of both elected and nominated members of parliament. Both houses of parliament, Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha. And remember this, both elected and nominated, because Rajya Sabha also has nominated members as well. They are also part of this electoral college, which participates in the election process of Vice President. Now, this is very much different to the electoral college of president, different from the electoral college of the president. Okay, how so? Well, for president, only elected members of the parliament are part of this electoral college, plus elected member of state legislative assemblies also are part of electoral college of president. Okay, remember this distinction. But for vice president, well, it is very simple, both elected and nominated members of just parliament, not state legislative assemblies. Clear? Now, how do the elections take place? You all know about this. There are 2 election processes that are followed in India. One is the first past the post system. first past the post system. Okay, in this, well, all the MLA MP elections happen through this, and then there is proportional representation by means of single transferable vote, right? Proportional representation, it's a different electoral process. Okay, you must be knowing about this. If you don't, we'll cover it in a separate lecture. Okay, but the elections of president, elections of vice president, elections of members of parliament of Rajya Sabha, well, they are all elected by proportional representation by means of single transferable vote. Also remember this, because they can ask an MCQ and it's a very small information, but they can confuse you with that small information in the MCQ in prelims. Well, the elections of vice president and president take place through secret ballot. Nobody knows who voted for who. Remember this part, secret ballot. Okay. Now, what if there is any election dispute? Okay, if there is any election dispute that the procedure was not followed properly, there is some fraudulent activities. If there is any dispute, well, Presidential and Vice Presidential Elections Act of 1952 deals with that dispute. So if there is any dispute with respect to president elections or vice president elections, this law deals with that. Clear? And this law says that if there is any dispute, the dispute shall be decided by the Supreme Court of India and that decision shall be final. No appeal in that. Clear? So this is for election disputes. By the way, you cannot challenge the election of president or vice president. You cannot raise an election dispute if the electoral college was not complete. If in the electoral college some 10-20 members were absent, they were not voting, right? You can't say that this election is not valid and therefore I'm raising an election dispute. So the constitution makes it clear, okay? Election cannot be challenged that electoral college was not complete. By the way, if there is an election dispute, like 2 years or 3 years after the elections, and the Supreme Court says, yes, the election dispute is valid and we declare the election of the vice president void, right? So the vice president will have to be removed from his post because his election was declared void. But for these past 2-3 years, whatever acts the vice president committed, they won't be invalidated. Okay, remember this part. Clear? So vice president, let's suppose, was fraudulently elected. He performed his duties and after 2 years, well, his election was declared void and he resigned. But in these past 2 years, whatever acts he committed, whatever official duties he performed, those won't be invalidated just by saying that the election was fraudulent. Okay, remember this. All acts are not invalidated. Remember this part. Okay, small information is important because MCQs are designed in such a way that these small information, which generally aspirants ignore, well, they are the deciding factor whether you'll reach the correct option or not. So remember this small information. Okay. Now, as far as the qualification of the candidates who are fighting for the post of VP, Vice President, is concerned, well, let's take a look at that. So qualifications. First of all, the Constitution says very clearly, the VP should be a citizen of India. Minimum age should be 35 years of age. Should be qualified to contest the election of Rajya Sabha. So all the qualifications required for Rajya Sabha MPs are required for Vice President as well. And the Vice President or the candidate should not hold any office of profit under union government or state government. So the Vice President should not hold any other job under union government or state government. Okay, this is what we mean by office of profit. But the office of profit does not include president, vice president, governor, or any minister. So a sitting minister can fight for VP elections. A sitting governor can fight for VP elections. A sitting president, though he will never, but a sitting president can also fight for VP elections. These 4 posts are not considered office of profit. Remember this. Clear? And, well, to fight the elections for the Vice President of India, well, you have to get yourself nominated. Now, to nominate yourself for the candidature of Vice President of India, well, it needs to be supported by 20 electors as proposers and 20 electors as seconders in the parliament. Clear? Plus, you have to deposit 15,000 rupees as security with RBI, as security deposit. Okay, these are minor things which you have to remember. Once the Vice President is elected, well, an oath is administered to him. And that oath is administered by President of India. Remember this. When the President gets elected, then the oath is administered by Chief Justice of India. But when the Vice President gets elected, the oath is administered by President. Now, in the past prelims examinations, questions with respect to the contents of oath were asked. Questions were asked with respect to the contents of the oath. Therefore, just remember that the oath of Vice President contains these two things: to bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of India, to faithfully discharge the duties of his or her office. Just remember these 2 points, because questions are asked on oath as well. So remember this. Remember the oath of President as well. Okay. Now, some more conditions of the office of Vice President. Okay. So conditions of office. First of all, he or she should not be a member of either House of Parliament or House of State Legislature. And if he is, and he gets elected as Vice President, he should immediately resign from his post as Member of Parliament or Member of Legislative Assembly. Okay, so this is one condition. The term of office of Vice President is 5 years. Simple. Okay, he can hold office beyond 5 years until a successor is elected. It can happen, but this should never happen. Okay, the Constitution has made it clear that, well, just before the term is about to end, just before this 5-year term is about to end, the elections for the new Vice President should take place before the expiry of 5-year period. But if for some reason that doesn't happen, well, the Vice President shall continue till a new person is elected. Clear? And yes, Vice President of India is eligible for re-election any number of times. There is no limitation by the Constitution. Okay? Make sense? Now let's talk about the most important part. Well, the part which was in the news also, because Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar resigned, right? And some people say unceremoniously resigned. So let's talk about this vacancy in the office of Vice President. Okay? So vacancy. Now, the office of Vice President can lie vacant if he resigns. And remember, the resignation should be handed over to the President. Okay? So if he resigns, if he is removed by Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha, there is a proper process of removal. We'll talk about this. Okay. Then if he is disqualified due to, well, the election was invalidated by the Supreme Court, then, well, when the tenure gets expired or there is untimely death. In these cases, well, the office of Vice President lies vacant. And what does the Constitution say? Whenever there is a vacancy in the office, the Constitution says that the new VP should be elected as soon as possible. Okay, remember this because they can ask an MCQ to confuse you. How? I'll tell you. The Constitution writes as soon as possible. The Constitution does not write any time limit. Generally, there is a time limit that the elections should take place within 6 months. But the Constitution does not mention that it should take place for the election of the new Vice President should take place within 6 months. There is no such thing written in the Constitution. So they might ask you an MCQ that consider the following statements. The election of the new Vice President, if the office lies vacant, should take place within 6 months as per the Constitution. That statement would be false because it is as soon as possible. Remember this part. Okay? Alright. Now this is vacancy. But as we all know that this current controversy surrounding former Vice President Jagdeep Dhankar was related to resignation. Okay? He resigned citing personal reasons. He said that the personal reasons were that, well, his health is not allowing this. Clear? But then there are so many conspiracy theories doing the rounds of media and every political circle. There are so many conspiracy theories, but the official reason is health. Though the Constitution does not mention any grounds for resignation. Okay, you can resign, well, whatever your reason is. Make sense? Simple? Now, let's talk about this procedure, removal. Let's suppose the VP doesn't resign, not disqualified, term is still going on, and, well, there is no untimely death. But the legislators, parliamentarians are not happy with the performance of Vice President and they want to remove him or her. Then what is the procedure in front of them? Well, the Constitution has given a detailed removal process. Okay. First of all, the Constitution says that the parliamentarians, members of Rajya Sabha, members of Lok Sabha can remove Vice President of India. But the Constitution of India does not mention any grounds for removal. Okay. No grounds are mentioned in the Constitution for removal. You can remove the Vice President for any reason you like. Like for Chief Justice of India, the grounds mentioned are not Chief Justice, any Supreme Court judge. Proved misbehavior or incapacity, right? If there is proved misbehavior, the misbehavior of the judge is proved, or he is incapable mentally or physically. Or only on these two grounds you can remove a Supreme Court or a High Court judge. But no such grounds are mentioned for the Vice President. Clear? Okay. Now, how can this Vice President of India be removed? Well, the removal process will always start in Rajya Sabha. Why? Because, well, he acts as the ex officio chairman of Rajya Sabha. He is more important for Rajya Sabha than Lok Sabha. Okay. So, a resolution for the removal of Vice President of India can be introduced only in Lok Sabha, not in, only in Rajya Sabha, not in Lok Sabha. Remember this. The resolution for removal of Vice President of India shall only be moved in Rajya Sabha, not Lok Sabha. Plus, when you are moving this resolution, at least 14 days notice has to be given to him in advance. Then, 14-day notice given, resolution is admitted in Rajya Sabha. Then, at that moment, it will be put to vote. If the Rajya Sabha passes that resolution with effective majority, okay, now what is effective majority? Well, look, there is this thing called absolute majority. Now, in absolute majority, the total number of votes should be more than 50% of total membership of that house. Okay, this is absolute. Then effective. The thing is, let's suppose Rajya Sabha has 250 members, but 10 members resigned, and today Rajya Sabha has 240 members. So effective majority means 50% of the current membership. Subtract the 10 offices that are vacant, 10 MPs that are vacant. Current membership. This is effective majority. And then there is simple majority. Well, 50% of present and voting. Those who are present that day. Their office is not vacant. They are present that day. Okay, this is simple majority. Now in Rajya Sabha, the resolution has to be passed by effective majority, and then it will go to Lok Sabha, and Lok Sabha can pass it by simple majority. Basically, the main call for removal of Vice President has to be taken by Rajya Sabha. Make sense? Okay, this is the removal process. Now, as far as the roles and responsibilities of Vice President are concerned, well, let's talk about that. Okay, role and responsibility. Well, the role and responsibility of Rajya Sabha is pretty much similar to of Vice President of India is pretty much similar to the American Vice President. Same. Okay. How so? Well, the Vice President of India shall act as the ex officio chairperson of Rajya Sabha. Okay. He shall preside over the proceedings of Rajya Sabha. Ex officio chairperson of Rajya Sabha. That is same as American Vice President. Okay. American Vice President presides over Senate, the upper house of American legislature. The lower house is Congress, the upper house is Senate. Okay, so American Vice President presides over the Senate meetings. Clear? Same. Then, he or she shall act as the acting President of India if there is vacancy in the office of President. If there is vacancy in the office of the President, well, Vice President shall act as President until the new President is elected. And the Constitution has given a time limit. When the president office lies vacant because of any reason, death, incapacity, resignation, any reason, when the office of president is vacant, well, the vice president shall act as president for 6 months. Within these 6 months, next elections should take place. So there is an upper limit put by the Constitution of India. Make sense? And the reason for this is, well, Article 52 of our Constitution says there shall be a president of India, which means there shall always be a president of India. India will be never without a president, which means that if there is vacancy, accidental, untimely vacancy in the office of the president, India should always have a president. So VP shall act as P, president, okay, till new vice president is elected. Clear? Now remember this. When the vice president is performing the role of the president, well, he shall be the president of India. He shall be, he won't remain as the ex officio chairperson of Rajya Sabha. When he is acting as president, he won't be the presiding officer of Rajya Sabha. His duties will be performed by the deputy chairman. Remember this part. Clear? Make sense? All right. Now let's talk about, well, the comparison between Indian VP and American VP. Well, if we talk about similarities, they are numerous. Okay. Well, acting president job. If tomorrow Donald Trump basically resigns or his office lies vacant, JD Vance, the vice president of USA, will become the president. Okay. So acting president. Similarly, the second job is, well, presiding officer of upper chamber. In India, that's Rajya Sabha. In America, that is Senate. Clear? So there are so many similarities, but there are some differences as well. In fact, one difference. Pardon my handwriting, it's not coming out well in this on this board. Nonetheless, there is one difference, and that is when the office of president lies vacant. Okay, let's first talk about America. Let's suppose tomorrow Donald Trump's office lies vacant. So JD Vance will become the president. JD Vance will remain president till the end of 4 years, which is the official term of the president. Okay, but in India, the vice president shall remain president for 6 months only. In USA, the vice president remains president for the remainder of the term. In India, it's 6 months only. That's the only distinction. Major distinction. All right? Okay. That's about it as far as Vice President of India is concerned. But let's talk about the current controversy. Okay? Well, the thing is that this is the first time that the Vice President of India has resigned before the expiry of his term. Now, why am I saying this is the first time? Well, in the past also, 2 Vice Presidents have resigned before the expiry of their term. But they resigned to fight the elections for the president. But this time, Jagdeep Dhankad resigned not to fight for the election of president, for nothing. He just resigned. This has never happened in India. In the past, 2 vice presidents have resigned before the expiry of their term. Okay, but they did so for fighting the elections of president, for a promotion. This is the first time, for no particular reason known to the public, except the grounds that are given, that health, Vice President of India resigned. Okay, so if we talk about the VPs who resigned, well, the first one was V.V. Giri, again in 1969 to fight for presidential elections. Then Ramaswamy Venkatraman, he resigned to fight elections on Congress ticket for president. But Jagdeep Dhankad resigned for no such reason. So this is why this is a little, I mean, there are so many conspiracy theories that are doing the rounds. All right. And that would be all. With that, we conclude today's session. I'm sure it has added value to your preparation, but the value would be partial, not complete, if you do not revise and memorize this, if you do not ask your doubts in the WhatsApp groups, if you do not save the mind maps that we share along with every lecture, and if you do not give tests on time. Please do the following. Okay. Please do the things that I just mentioned. It is very important. And on that note, I'll be signing off with the promise of seeing you again in the next lecture. Thank you, everyone.